Hola a todos, espero que estén bien y hoy vamos a hablar sobre dos tiempos verbales que nosotros ya conocemos. Entonces, nosotros ya aprendimos la conjugación del pretérito. Nosotros ya aprendimos la conjugación del imperfecto. Entonces, la conjugación ahora no debe ser ningún problema. Ahora, también mencionamos que estos dos tiempos verbales, ambos representan el pasado, no el futuro, no el presente, sino el pasado. Dos tiempos verbales que representan el pasado. Y esto a veces puede ser un poco difícil para nosotros como anglohablantes porque es una distinción que realmente no está presente en inglés. So this is really probably our last truly tough grammatical topic, really, of the semester. And again, it's just one of those, it's kind of like ser en estar, saber en conocer, where there's really not a very good parallel, not a good equivalent in English. So, like I briefly mentioned in the introductory video for the imperfect, the preterit really is typically more for a specific event in time. So if we were to conceptualize kind of just, so we've got a timeline, right? And let's say this is the present right here because we're all dealing with the past. The preterit could be a point, just one spot. It happened then. The preterit could be something that happened with a clearly defined beginning and end. Or the preterit could be a sequence of things. This happened, then this happened, and this happened, all clearly finished. On the other hand, the imperfect, so let's label that preterit, if you can read that. And then the imperfect here is much, much vaguer, typically. So it could just represent something habitual, which is to say, I didn't do this 3 times, I didn't know this 5 times, I just used to do this. When I just say I used to do something, I don't know how many times, it's just something I used to do. It can be a habitual action in the past, or it can be simply something undefined in terms of temporal parameters. So meaning it doesn't have a clear-cut beginning and ending. So let's take a look at some examples. Let's take a look at really what we mean by all that. So, primero, ¿para qué se usa el pretérito? Lo usamos para narrar, to narrate finished actions in the present. Por ejemplo, Teresa comió bistec con judías verdes. Expresa el principio o el final de una acción en el pasado. Because remember again, preterit typically more specific. Something starts, something stops at a specific moment in time. Entonces, por ejemplo, el concierto empezó a las 8, concert started at 8 o dejó de llover a las 11. It stopped raining at 11. So again, specific beginnings, endings, specific moments in time. Luego narra hechos completados en el pasado. So an event, something that happened that has a clear beginning, clear temporal parameters, and a clear end. So anoche, last night. We know this happened last night, so it's obviously ended. Anoche fui al cine, quedé con mis amigos y cenamos juntos. So it's a series, really a sequence of events that happened in that order, right? I did this, then I did this, then we did this. So it's narrating that sequence of events. Luego expresa cambios físicos o emocionales en el pasado. So a physical or an emotional change. Generally, something is going to trigger that change, right? And that typically happens at a specific moment in time. So here in our example, se pusieron contentos al verla. They they became very happy when they saw her. That sounds a little better in Spanish than it does in English. So they saw her at a specific moment in time, right? And that was the moment that provoked the happiness. So that was the moment when they became happy. So typically, physical, emotional, the beginning or end, any change in physical or emotional state is typically going to be represented with the preterit. Y finalmente describe el tiempo como eventos del pasado en un momento determinado. So really what we have here again is something with a clear-cut beginning and end. So for example, el invierno pasado, last winter. That's got a clear-cut beginning and end. So that last winter, it didn't rain, or excuse me, it didn't snow a lot. Que es cierto para nosotros, ¿no? I don't think it even did snow. Or it never stick. I never touched my shovel. Entonces, el invierno pasado no nevó mucho. So those are our primary uses of our preterit. Now, let's take just a quick look. Let's do a little bit of practice. So again, I'll go through this kind of fast, but if you want kind of a minute, just pause the video if you need a little bit of time to kind of think of the response. So applying these, can we explain why these are in the preterit? So we've got Lucia y Lucas jugaron al fútbol. So here we've got our preterit is telling us that it's a one-time event that has finished. So it's narrating a finished action, a completed action in the past. Luego anoche llovió por 2 horas. Rained for 2 hours last night. 2 hours. Specific again, beginning and end. Determined amount of time. No ambiguity. 2 hours it rained. So that specificity typically lends itself to the preterit. Luego, el sábado pasado fueron al parque, hicieron un picnic y volaron el papalote. So here, we have again that sequence of events in order. So they did this, then they did this, then they did that. All clearly completed actions because one was done after the other. So we have a narration of a sequence of events in the past. Luego, Antonio y Ana se pusieron tristes al escuchar. Antonio and Ana became sad upon hearing the news. We've got here a change in emotional state, right? It was the news, whatever it may have been, that provoked that change in emotional state and that arrived at a specific moment in time. Luego, el partido de béisbol no empezó hasta las 8. So here we've got the beginning of an event. And again, a beginning, specific moment in time. So, we seeing any patterns here? Again, going back to those really bad drawings, typically defined parameters, at the very least the ending is defined and clear cut, or it's the beginning or the end of something. Typically either specific or defined moments in time. Mainly, at a minimum, with a defined ending. Ahora, ¿para qué usamos el imperfecto entonces? Entonces, esto es algo muy común cuando estamos contando una historia, algo que pasó en el pasado. So this is a very common kind of narrative technique. Because remember, the imperfect was that squiggly line. It was the ambiguity. It didn't matter when it started, when it stopped, just that it was happening. We typically use the imperfect to essentially set the scene. So this is what was going on. And it doesn't matter how long it was going on. That's not important. When this happened. So llovía cuando Pedro llegó. So how long was it raining? Who knows? And it doesn't matter. It's not important. And then Pedro arrived at a specific moment in time. Or we could have it be a complete sentence as well. Patricia cocinaba y Paula hacía la tarea. So here, we don't know how long. We just know that Patricia was cooking and Paula was doing homework. We don't know how long. We don't know when. Just that it was in the past. Again, a greater degree of ambiguity. So we could have in our next sentence, suddenly, they heard a knock on the door. De repente escucharon un ruido en la puerta. Expresa acciones o eventos habituales en el pasado. So, if it's something, it's kind of like the used to do something in English. If I used to do something, I'm not saying I did it 3 times, I'm not saying I did it 7 times, just that I used to do it. Very vague, right? Really the same thing with our imperfect in Spanish. Entonces, por ejemplo, en el pasado, yo comía fuera todos los días. Now, this one is a little bit of an exception. So, again, with a language, no rule, no structure is going to be absolutely perfect. So, I almost like to look at this with an asterisk, or kind of as an exception, because time or age, in theory, should be a specific defined thing. So just remember it this way. Time or age, always imperfect in the past. Just remember it that way. So, for example, tenía 8 años cuando nació mi prima, o eran las 3 de la tarde. And then also, so we talked about physical and emotional changes in state with the preterit. Now, if I'm just talking about a state itself in the past, I'm going to use the imperfect. So, for example, estaba cansado. Because normally, so I was tired. And normally I'm not going to say I was tired for 3 hours, 2 minutes, and 27 seconds. Right? It's much vaguer than that. And the nice thing about Spanish is we can actually use grammar to represent that ambiguity. So, again, what are we seeing here? Imperfect, much vaguer than the preterit. Much less defined parameters. It can be more than once, depending on the context. So, just a lot less detail, right? And then describe la situación en la que pasan otros eventos. This is really, again, very similar to that idea of setting the scene. So here we've got it with a cuando, when. So hacía la tarea y escuchaba música cuando. So we're setting something up. This is what was going on when this happened. Hacía la tarea y escuchaba música cuando me llamó mi mamá. I was doing homework and I was listening to music. When did I start? When did I stop? Doesn't matter. That's not important. When at one specific moment, and then something typically in the preterite is going to interrupt it. So when my mother called me, for example. Ahora, un poquito de práctica aquí. Vamos a ver. And again, if you want more time, just feel free to pause the video. Entonces, eran las 10 de la noche. ¿Por qué imperfecto? Tiempo, ¿verdad? Tiempo siempre imperfecto. Luego escuchaba música clásica y jugaba en la computadora. Entonces, ¿hay referencia al comienzo, al final? Do we have any reference to the beginning or end? No, it's just what I was doing. Luego, Mónica corría 10 kilómetros todos los días. So here, is it a one-time thing? 2 times? 3 times? 10 times? 20 times? No. Every day she would run those 10 kilometers. Every day she used to run those 10 kilometers. So habitual. Luego Manuel estaba emocionado con el regalo. So here we've got emotional state. He was excited. And again, one typically does not then come to a halt, like you're slamming on the brakes and just stop being excited. It's kind of a gradual thing, and we're representing that grammatically here. Finalmente, Montse tenía 25 años cuando se casó. So here we've got age. So she was 25 years old when she got married. So again, just remember, even though, because I almost look at it like an exception. Time and age, we're going to use the imperfect. Ahora vamos a hablar un poco sobre la combinación. So we're going to really go off of that idea we saw when I talked about the setting the scene. So a lot of times we can see here the imperfect describes what was going on when another action in the preterite interrupts it. Entonces, por ejemplo, hablaba con Paloma cuando llegó Paco. I was talking to Paloma when Paco arrived. We know how long I was talking to Paloma? No, and it's not important for the purposes of this story. And then at one particular instant, Paco arrived. Or, Esteban corría cuando le llamó Estrella. So Esteban was running, and then at a specific moment in time, Estrella called him. O Raquel cantaba cuando oyó su teléfono. So, do we know how long Raquel had been singing? Do we know when she started? No. Just that vague. She was singing. And then at one specific moment in time, and that's why we've got our preterite with the verb oír, oyó, she heard her phone at a specific moment in time. O Diego paseaba por el parque cuando vio a Dolores. So here, how long was Diego walking around the park? We don't know. But then at one specific moment in time, he saw Dolores. So a lot of times, again, we're going to use the imperfect kind of to set the scene. This is what was going on. This is our background. And then this is our focus. This is the main thing. This happened within that background when we're narrating something when we're telling a story in the past. So very often they go together. Entonces, vamos a practicar un poquito aquí. Entonces aquí tenemos la pregunta, ¿quién interrumpe a quién? Entonces, Pablo buscaba una solución cuando Paula se la dijo. So, do we know how long Pablo was looking for a solution? No. But then at one specific moment in time, Paula gave it to him. So Paula interrupted Pablo. Luego, Victoria ganaba cuando el árbitro le dio una tarjeta roja. So do we know how long Victoria had been winning? Do we know if they were in minute 20, minute 80? I don't know. We don't know. And then at one, so we're obviously talking about soccer here, at one specific moment, while she was winning, her team was winning, she got a red card. So the ref interrupted Victoria. Luego Víctor llamó a la puerta cuando Vanessa se vestía. This is always an awkward situation. So, Víctor llamó a la puerta. That happens at a specific moment in time. Victor knocked on the door while Vanessa was getting dressed. Do we know how long she'd been getting dressed? No. But at a specific moment in time, he interrupted her by knocking on the door. Nuria compraba ropa cuando escuchó a Nacho. So do we know how long Nuria had been shopping for clothes? No. Could have been an hour, could have been 10 hours, could have been 15 minutes. And then at one specific moment, she heard Nacho, "Hola, Nuria." So Nacho interrupts Nuria. Luego, Andrés miraba por la ventana cuando Alba pasó en coche. So do we know how long Andrés was looking out the window? No. But at one specific moment in time, Alba drove by. So she interrupted. So our background was that Andrés was looking out the window, and then the focus, Alba going by in a car, in her car. Finalmente, Beatriz conducía cuando Julio puso la música. So Beatriz was driving. Do we know how long? No. And then at one specific moment, Julio put on music. Entonces aquí Julio interrumpe a Beatriz. So that's honestly one of the most common uses when we put them together, when we're tagging a story. So this is what was going on, and then in that background we just said, this is what happened. We also have kind of some temporal expressions that can really tip us off. And we can see again, preterite ones tend to be pretty specific. Last night, day before yesterday, suddenly, this morning, last weekend, last month, last Monday, one time. Siempre con un fin obvio. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Because the siempre is a little bit different and it's not very common. And the imperfect is much vaguer. Again, regularly, frequently, from time to time, while. Frequently, so with frequency, frequently. With frequency, that doesn't really work in English. Every Monday, every week, every day, month, year, many times, always. So what do we mean by an obvious ending compared to an unobvious ending, without no obvious ending? I would say very commonly, more commonly, we're going to have siempre with the imperfect. And because generally there's not, when I say always, generally there's not a clearly defined end. When I talk about when I think about a defined end, a specific end, Honestly, the main thing that comes to mind is like some sappy breakup song or something like that, where I would say like, yo siempre estuve ahí para ti. Like, I was always there for you. Yo siempre estuve, preterit, ahí para ti. So I'm really emphasizing that I always was, but no longer. There's a clear cut end. But I would say much less common. Generally, we're going to have the imperfect with that. Another way of looking at it is just kind of this, where the imperfect describes what it was like, while the preterit tells you what happened. Is just kind of another way of looking at it. This is kind of a difficult topic. We all learn in different ways, so I'm trying to just give a few different perspectives. Entonces ahora vamos a ver algunos ejemplos y después vamos a practicar un poquito juntos. Entonces, por ejemplo, yo vi Star Wars por primera vez cuando tenía 6 años, más o menos. Algo muy importante en mi vida, obviamente. O el estudiante se durmió mientras el profesor hablaba. O yo leía cuando mi amigo me llamó por teléfono. O nosotros estábamos contentos cuando salimos de clase hace 4 semanas. I think the last time I taught this, I think that was like when we went on spring break. I don't even know, again, what day it is right now, what week it is, blah, 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 etc. O yo dormía cuando el gato brincó encima de mí. I was sleeping. How long I've been sleeping doesn't matter. Not important to this story. And then suddenly, the cat jumped on top of me. O eran las 11 de la noche cuando terminé esta presentación. All right, so now let's wrap up by doing a little practice together. So now it's blanked out. And again, if you need more time, just feel free to pause the video. Entonces, en la licenciatura, undergrad, yo trabajaba todos los días. Habitual, so it's habitual. Luego, anoche, yo vi Netflix. Specific amount of time, last night. Here, yo compré mi computadora hace 2 años y medio. So 2.5 years ago. Specific time, again. And buying something is generally something that occurs at a specific moment in time, at least something as significant as a computer. Luego, de niño, yo tenía miedo a los extraterrestres. Still do a little bit. So, emotion, una emoción. Oh, cuando yo era niño, mi mamá siempre escuchaba My Heart Will Go On. Most of you are probably too young to remember this. But yes, there was a time in around 1997, 1998, where it wasn't 1 time, it wasn't 2 times, it wasn't 5 times, it wasn't 10 times, it wasn't 30 times. I don't know how many times my mom listened to that song. It seemed like she was always listening to it. So again, undefined number of times, undefined beginning and end, so we're going to go with imperfect. O tu instructor hizo esta presentación el fin de semana pasado. So here again, clearly defined temporal parameter. Por otro lado, you can tell this is before the coronavirus too. Ustedes se divirtieron el fin de semana pasado. That is not social distancing. I hope you didn't do that last weekend. Let's say el año pasado. O antes de hoy. No sabíamos la diferencia entre el pretérito y el imperfecto. So think back to when we learned saber. Remember, in the imperfect, the meaning changes a little bit. So when I say yo supe algo, it means I found out, because again, it represents the specific moment in which I learned something. If I just want to say I knew, that's not defined temporally. So I'm going to use my imperfect. So we have a few verbs. There aren't many. Saber, conocer are probably our most common, where we actually have a subtle changing in meaning. So that's it. I know this is a bit of a longer lesson, so thanks for making it this far. If you have any questions, because again, this is, I would say, top three to top 5 most difficult topics of the semester. If you have any questions, please post them to our course discussion board. That way everyone can see them. So thank you again. Take care, and we'll talk to you soon. Hola a todos.